We got the recording. The recording. There are literally dozens of people. Yeah. Yeah, tens of ones want to hear this.
There is a multitude.
Yeah. Yeah. Where one or two are listening, there Garrett shall be. Yeah. Yes, the Lord works in mysterious ways, I say. All right. Genesis 20, let's get to it. We left off. We were talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. We were kind of hopefully shifting our lens a little bit about what that story actually means. So as a little bit of review, what was the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah? Oppression, that's right. Oppression, arrogance, not providing for the needy, and inhospitality, all right? So they had a lot of stuff going on. Now, once again, was homosexuality present in that story? Yes. Does that mean that it was the main sin that we should all focus on? No. Absolutely not. It was more of a side effect rather than the main cause. The main cause was their inhospitality. We talked a little bit about last week that the story would have been the same had the angels taken the form of two women. All right? The homosexuality element is often emphasized needlessly because the real sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, what got God's attention was their oppression. So then we moved on into Lot's reaction to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember, we kind of looked at it, and at least it was kind of a surprise to me whenever we were studying it, that Lot does not leave willingly Sodom and Gomorrah. We talked a little bit about Lot's descent into corruption. First, he just plants his tents near Sodom and Gomorrah. Then he is associated with being a people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And whenever we meet him at the beginning of this story, he is at the city gates. He is an elder, or he is a leader of Sodom and Gomorrah. He has become part of the corrupt system. And that makes it to where it is difficult for him to leave, so much so that we are told in the text that the angels have to grab him and his family by the hands and drag them out, or at least that's how I'm imagining it, dragging them out. Then we get this very, very weird instance of, of Lot's wife looking back and being turned into a pillar of salt. A lot of times when we imagine that in the stories, or at least what I did, was I imagined just a quick glance back and poof, into a table of salt that you put in a little shaker and you can season some meat with Lot's wife. That is not what happened. We see that her look was more like a lingering gaze. She was literally hesitating once again to leave the corrupt system that was working for them. Remember, Lot is a bigwig here. He's learned how to play the game. And sometimes it's hard, even in a corrupt system, to leave something that's working for you. So Lot's wife also had that kind of difficulty in leaving this system. So God doesn't turn her into table salt, he turns her into a pillar of salt, which would have been basically forming her into the landscape, making her part of this geography that she couldn't leave. So instead of, God just poofing her into dust, he instead says, if you want to be a part of this system so bad, then I will make you a part of it permanently. That's what happens to her. And so they go. Then we get this really gross story about Lot and his daughters in a cave. We talked a little bit about it, but we had to breeze kind of over it. But just remember, when was the last time that people saw mass destruction on the earth? The flood. So there's a lack of trust here in Lot's daughters that the world is still out there. Most rabbis are going to say that Lot's daughters thought that the world had been destroyed again. And so instead of them just having to repopulate the clan, they had to repopulate the earth, which which lends to their mindset of desperation. Doesn't justify it, still really, really gross, but kind of gives you a little bit more of a window into what might have caused them to do that. So that leads us to chapter 20. Yeah. We're not really sure. What I think I remember, Lot is married whenever they leave the clan, but I can't say that for certain. But we don't know. From what I remember, we don't know anything about her. So she might have been from Sodom and Gomorrah, which would lend itself to why she had such a really difficult time leaving. But yeah, I'm not sure, and we're not really sure the age of Lot. Throughout all this story, we just know he's younger than Abraham. But in any case, any more questions or comments about that story? All right, we're going to be in chapter 20. Stop me if you've heard this before. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister,' and she herself say, 'He is my brother'? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all his servants, and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you? You have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin. You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did these things?" Abraham said, "I did it because I thought there's no fear of God at all in this place, and that they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do me at every place to which we come. Say of me, he is my brother.' Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'Behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you.' To Sarah he said, 'Behold, I have given you your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated.' Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and also his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife." All right. What's weird?
Sorry, two things. One, why didn't you use this passage as proof of her being his sister back a while back?
Because I'm saying that she's his niece. That passage in there in the Hebrew is not present. That is a translator, once again, trying to...
Okay, what's the original then?
I told you she is my sister.
Okay.
And he's trying to say that is true. She's part of my clan.
Okay, I just wondered why you didn't use that.
Yes, yeah,
also,
no.
Why did God give Abimelech a chance to repent when he didn't give Pharaoh?
Does he not give Pharaoh a chance?
Well, I don't think so, because he immediately starts giving them consequences, doesn't he?
Right. What would have been the consequence for Abimelech here?
Well, already their wombs were closed. But I
Yep.
don't know if they had a chance.
Yeah, and death.
Right.
So he doesn't kill either one. He doesn't kill Pharaoh and he doesn't kill Abimelech. And in fact, he actually curses Pharaoh and Abimelech both, we learn. Abimelech with the closing of wombs, and for some reason, he has to be healed, which makes me think that he was sick in some form. So interesting, interesting, I'm trying to say, nice thing to notice. But I think these stories mirror each other, except in very crucial ways, and I think you're picking up on it a little bit. What else is weird about this story?
In 12, it says that she's the daughter of his father, which would make her his half-sister.
Right, and that's what I was saying. That in the Hebrew is not present, that sentence.
Okay.
That is a translator trying to, what he feels is, correct the Bible. It's a similar thing that happens whenever we look at the story of Lot, where a lot of translations are going to say, "You are my close relative," when in the Hebrew it's brother. That is a translator trying to make sense of things that he believes or she believes and imposing that on the Bible rather than just translating it straight from the Hebrew. Any other comments or concerns?
It's just crazy that Abraham was like, hey, I know how to get more stuff in.
Right, yes, yeah. So we do have a weird dichotomy. Like, what is his motivation? What does the text say is his motivation?
He says, they're going to kill me because of my life.
Yeah, okay, I'm afraid. However, you make a good point that whenever he does this in Egypt, what does he walk away from? With a bunch of stuff. And what does he walk away from with this? A bunch of stuff. So actually in Early Bird, we talked about, is Abraham kind of greedy here? Is there like a kind of a secret sin that we don't notice? Is like greed? Maybe. It's very possible. What? Yeah, in the bad way. Yeah.
But it is kind of just like, from the Western mind, it's weird that Abimelech is cursed. Like, same with Pharaoh. He didn't know. No one.
Yeah, and I would.
Told him that
Right, and I wouldn't even say that's from the Western perspective. That's in the text. He says it's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, I didn't know any better. I didn't even touch her yet. Is what his thing was. Okay, what else is weird? Who's the hero of this story?
In what way?
Well, who's the good guy?
Abimelech.
Abimelech. Who's the villain of this story? Abraham. Why does he lie? What does he say to Abimelech? Why does he lie?
He was afraid they was going to kill him.
Because this is a godless place. The fear of the Lord is not in this place. They're all going to kill me.
Weird thing for a guy to say who fought so staunchly against Sodom and Gomorrah.
Very odd. So, this story tells us a couple of things. One, Abraham is human. And if we're talking about addiction language here, we're going to say that Abraham has a relapse. He goes back into old patterns. He is afraid for his life, and he doesn't trust God enough to protect him. So, he is going to lie again. What's interesting here is the chronology is kind of wonky, because anyone remember what happened like 2 chapters ago? What did God say to Sarah? Well, what did God say to Sarah in a year's time? What's going to happen to her? Yeah, she's going to have a kid. So, one question that I have is Sarah pregnant? And if so, man, Abraham, what more do you need to know that things are coming down the pipe? But in any case, whatever. We actually had that conversation a little bit in the previous class about, it's like, man, what does God have to do to gain Abraham's full and complete trust? And I think we could ask that same question in the mirror every morning. What does God have to do to get your complete trust? What more does he have to do? And yet we still act out of the same motivations as Abraham. Whether it's greed, whether it's fear, whatever, we do the exact same thing. So before we're too hard on Abraham, make sure we look at ourselves and say, God has brought us through a lot of stuff, and yet we still don't trust him. What if he doesn't this time? So, in any case, we find that Abraham is human. He has a relapse. He goes into old patterns. And we learn that growth isn't linear. It's not that, oh, he learned this lesson, so now it's just up and up and up and up. Sometimes growth is a roller coaster. It's kind of like the stock market. Probably not today or yesterday, but, it has its ups and downs, but gradually goes up, supposedly. That's the same way with spiritual growth. It's not just this one-stop shop to the mountaintop. There's dips. There's valleys. Abraham acts as if God cannot protect Sarah despite the promise of a son. In my opinion, even though the son of the promise might already be being fulfilled. And Abraham assumed there's surely no fear of God in this place because they were outsiders. Abraham has one more lesson to learn about the vulnerable and the oppressed, and that is that they can be anywhere, and that integrity can be found anywhere. We've actually talked a little bit about this in the youth class, about this overarching moral law of the world. Paul talks about this, that there is a moral law written on the hearts of men. That just because they don't know God does not mean that they don't know right and wrong. And here we see one of the first examples, but definitely not the last, of the righteous pagan versus the failure of the man of God. What's probably the most famous story of this paradigm? This is probably the first one we have, but definitely not the last. What's probably the most famous? Yeah, I think so. And we're going to come back to Jonah here in a little bit. But this is not the first time that God will humble his people by showing his people the righteousness of those outside the covenant. He uses Abimelech to say, integrity can be found anywhere, Abraham, and at this point it is you that is bringing chaos and darkness into this world with your deception, and it is Abimelech who is correcting you. What's wild is that Abimelech, after learning of the deception, immediately corrects the response. He does not say, well, finders keepers, shut up. He says, fine, I'll let her go. Abimelech is the righteous party here, not Abraham. And this is something for us to take to heart as well, is that sometimes God will humble even those in the faith with the integrity of those outside. So don't judge too harshly those without faith, because it doesn't mean that they are not without honesty or integrity. We see this in this story, and we will see it again in Jonah big time, but we will also get it hammered into our heads when Jesus comes on the scene. My goodness, if there was a guy that loved to show the righteousness of the outsider versus the chaos of the insider, it was the J-Man. Okay? Next, we are going to go into the birth of Isaac.
Sorry, before we,
No. What? Yeah.
earlier you said that there was a chiasm between this and when Isaac does the same thing, right?
I said there was a parallel. There's not. I don't.
Okay.
I haven't found that big of a chiasm. I'm sure that it's probably there, but that would be that would make it a really big middle.
So never mind that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, unless you found one. Do you think you found one?
No,
Oh.
I was just wondering where this fits in. Where it's also a repeat, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Like another one mirrored on the other side or something.
Right, yeah, and I wouldn't say necessarily that every repeated story indicates a chiasm. There could be. I'm not saying you might be able to find a middle between these two things. But it is, in my view, it is more about growth. It's more a story about Abraham has one more lesson to learn.
I just misunderstood what you said.
Yes, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to read this passage because we have a lot to read already tonight, but we get to chapter 21, and then the first 7 verses, we have the birth of Isaac. Isaac, or Yitzhak in the Hebrew. Isaac's name is the embodiment of divine subversion. In a world of empire where power and biology are king, God laughs at the dead womb. His birth is a mocking of the logic of the world. I want you to keep this he laughs in mind. Yitzhak or Isaac means he laughs. Okay? This has an incredible amount of layers to it. Abraham laughs whenever he learns of the promise. Sarah laughs whenever she learns of the promise. Now it's kind of God's turn to laugh at the constraints of the world. Mother Nature or biology cannot contain the one who made it. And God shows that through this story. What's interesting is that the word here for visitation is paquad, and it actually has like an accounting background. God enters history not to work within human systems, but to override them, establishing that covenant is based on promise, not human merit. It's not about whether Sarah and Abraham are worthy of this promise. It is about the promise God made through his covenant. And we see that happen. All right, so I do want to make sure we keep in mind that Yitzhak means he laughs, and it is a sign of a covenant promise. He laughs. Okay. Verse 8 of chapter 21. And the child, being Isaac, grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir to my son Isaac. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, Be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make you a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven to say to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of... Uh-oh. That's not good. Okay. What's weird about this story?
It's interesting that it's weird that like Hagar is like, oh, this baby's gonna die. I'm just gonna go cry. And it's not her.
It's not. Yes. Okay. So it's not her that is heard. Okay. I like that. We pointed that out last class too. So it's not. God doesn't hear her specifically, or at least that's not what the text says. What else? Yeah. Usually when we read the story, it's like he must be like 5, right? Probably not. He was probably at least 18, 20. I know, yeah, and so the text, once again, chronology is weird in these stories. We're not really sure how these things happened. Yeah, Richard?
Is he making a nation for Ishmael?
Yeah, uh-huh. So we see that Ishmael is a son of the blessing, not of the covenant, but of the blessing. So any child of Abraham is going to be a great nation. And Ishmael, we will see that causes some issues.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not Islam.
Yes, Islam will point to Ishmael as Abraham's firstborn heir to the promise. And that's why they're called Islam. But they've got it's way more complicated than that, and I don't know it well enough. Yeah.
Weird repetition with a bow. She lays him a bow shot away, and then he becomes good with a bow. I don't know if that means.
Isn't that fun? I don't know what that means either, but I think it means something. That he's away from a bow shot and then becomes a great archer. I think there's probably a lesson to be learned in that, like, even your most traumatic events can form who you are, whether you use them negatively or positively. I think Ishmael uses it positively here to become an archer. What else?
Why is she carrying him if he's 18 to 20?
Right? I think that's supposed to be like as a motherly gesture, but yeah, it's a Hagar is either a brute or there's just some nice imagery going on there. Why is Ishmael in trouble with Sarah?
Because he was
Laughed.
He what?
He laughed.
He what?
He laughed and laughed and laughed.
He laughed. What does Isaac mean? He laughs. Do you think that this is a story about a guy making fun of his little brother and then his stepmom getting so mad that she kicks him out? I don't think so. This is a pretty extreme example because I'm imagining that Sarah is basically sentencing these two to death. And it almost happens. Sarah wants them gone. Like this time, there is no coming back. What is the sign of the covenant in Isaac's name? Laughter. What does Ishmael do? He laughs. Reading between the lines here, a lot of Hebrew authors are going to say that it wasn't just about Ishmael making fun of Isaac, it was that Ishmael was taking the place of the true heir. Ishmael thought he was the one. So much so that he takes the language of the covenant. He laughs. Some of your translations, once again, trying to correct the Bible, which is always wrong, is going to say mock. In my view, that is incorrect. It is he laughs. Because Isaac means he laughs. Ishmael is trying to usurp the promise. And what's interesting is, once again, we see that Abraham really loves Ishmael, really loves his son. He does not want to send Ishmael away. And I think that also plays a part in this. I think Sarah sees that Abraham loves Ishmael and wonders whether Abraham is going to have the heart to cut Ishmael off when the time comes. So we have a lot of elements at play here for Sarah to say such a drastic action as get out of here and almost certainly die in the wilderness. But God says to Abraham, don't worry about it. I will protect him. Hagar and Ishmael represent the marginalized in the story. In Hebraic thought, God's care for them proves he is not a tribal deity. Keep in mind what gets God's attention here. What does he say to Hagar that got his attention? The cry. Okay, once again we see this theme of the cry getting God's attention. What got his attention in Sodom and Gomorrah? The cry. What gets his attention in the Exodus? The cry. Okay? So we get this constant theme that God is the God who hears the cry. What did Hagar name God? The God who sees. And what does he do for her eyes? Opens her eyes. There's a nice parallel there. Also, what's kind of fun is that he sees Hagar, but hears Ishmael. So both have a very intimate relationship with God, and God both sees and hears the oppressed. Wells almost always represent life, and so whenever he opens Hagar's eyes to see a well, he is opening her eyes to the life that is before them. They are going to go on, and as it says, Ishmael is going to be a man who creates many nations. Out of his offspring, we're actually going to have some problems whenever we get to Judges and Joshua and 1 Samuel. And some even would say today we have problems with the promise or the rivalry between Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac. But here we go. So God provides a well in the wilderness, seeing the one the empire would cast out. Once again, we have this weird scenario where the people of God are actually seen as kind of the oppressors, and that they throw out the oppressed and the abused, and God comes and rescues the oppressed and abused even whenever it is at the hands of his own people. This is not the first time we will see this, and it's not the last time we will see this either. We're not going to read this part just because it's interesting in its own way, but not terribly. We have Abraham visiting Abimelech again. Remember, Abimelech is the guy that almost took Sarah as his wife in the previous chapter. And he makes a treaty with him. There's this kind of interesting ritual where he brings 7 lambs to the treaty. And it's supposed to represent this very completeness of this treaty. It's supposed to represent Abraham actually making a covenant with Abimelech, not just a contract. In fact, the term Beersheba is the well of the 7, the number 7 being Sheba, and the oath Shaba. So it's supposed to be kind of a play on words there. They are linguistically tied to make this place. And Beersheba is going to actually be a pretty prominent place in other stories. So whenever you hear the well at Beersheba or the place of Beersheba, keep this in mind, because geography almost always plays a part in stories. So whenever you hear Beersheba, I want you to think, I know what happened there. Hagar and Ishmael and the treaty of Abimelech. So that will always add a little bit more depth to a story you're reading currently if you remember what has happened there before. Just kind of an interesting tidbit about desert culture. At the signing of the treaty, Abraham plants a tamarisk tree. And what's interesting about a tamarisk tree is it's a very, very slow growing tree. But whenever it does, its leaves are such that whenever you sit under it, it's not just shade, but it actually kind of acts as like air conditioning. It's a very, very cool place to be under a tamarisk tree. But weirdly enough, a tamarisk tree will not reach maturity in your lifetime. So if you plant it, who are you planting it for?
Future generation.
The next generation. This is pretty much universally the sign that Abraham is going into legacy mode now. He is not so much concerned with what's good for him, but what's good for his legacy. And so doing, he plants a tree that will almost certainly not be enjoyed by him in his lifetime, but will be enjoyed by his generations to come. And we will actually see that Isaac actually has dealings with Abimelech as well. And so it turns out to be true that this treaty, represented by this tree, is going to pay dividends later in Abraham's line. Now, we are going to move on and probably spend the rest of our time in, if I may venture to say, probably the most famous story in Hebraic thought of the Bible, which is the binding of Isaac. You will sometimes hear it called the Akedah. It has its own name. It's so very special. And rabbis have tossed and turned this story over and over and over again. It has a lot to it. And so we are going to try and dissect it a little bit. We're going to ask some questions that we don't normally ask of this story, and try and gather a little bit more than we usually do, perhaps from just being a test of Abraham's faith. All right, so what I want you to do is try and clear your mind of all the baggage that you have about this story, and just look at it with fresh eyes. We're going to read basically the whole thing. So buckle in. We will be in chapter 22, starting in verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took his hand, the fire, and the knife, so they were both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. He said, Here I am, my son. He said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the land for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything for him, for I now know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of the place, The Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. And I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of the heavens and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham lived at Beersheba. All right, what's weird, what repeats itself, and what doesn't make sense?
Why did Isaac not return the favor?
Wow, right off the bat. Okay, what are you talking about?
It doesn't say, it only says Abraham returned. Abraham returned to the 2 men. It doesn't say Abraham came with Isaac.
Okay.
It doesn't even say Abraham unbound his son.
Yeah, so maybe it's just like, okay, peace out, figure it out. Okay, so verse 19. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together. We know that the Bible can be specific when it wants to be, because who goes up to the mountain? So Abraham rose early in the morning, verse 3, saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. So we have a first question of, where's Isaac? What else is weird? Deck?
There's a repetition kind of where Isaac says, My father, and Abraham says, Here I am.
Uh-huh.
And then the angel says, Abraham, and Abraham replies, Here I am.
Yeah, and it actually is, there's a third one right at the beginning.
Oh, I see it. I didn't notice that.
Yep, so there's 3 here I am statements. Yep.
It was on the 3rd day that he found the altar.
So on the 3rd day, what do you think the significance of that is? I don't know, but I see a number. Yep, all right, I love it. Okay, yep, what else?
We don't kind of see any repentance or sorrow from Abraham for his villainy role with what he did with Abimelech and trying to get stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of the first time you see Abraham kind of having to be if there's anything stuff-wise that Abraham now has that he probably values most, it has to be his only son.
Is it his only son?
Well, his only son that he believes or is the heir of the promise.
Well, let's analyze that for a moment. All right, what just happened in the last chapter?
They were sent away.
Okay, yeah, he said bye-bye to Ishmael. What's happening in this chapter? Bye-bye to Isaac. What did we just learn about with the tree planting? Abraham is in legacy mode. And back to back, he is losing 2 sons whom he loves. Okay? So there's a little bit more going on than just boo-hooing. This is I am losing everything in pretty short order. All right, what else? Yeah, it's when you put it back to back, it's kind of tough. Yeah.
I had this underlined in it where yours didn't read this way, but in verse 5, mine says, he said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you.
Okay.
So he either lied to the servants knowing he wasn't bringing Isaac back, or he thought that something was going to stop.
Yeah, okay.
One way or another, reading it that way.
Okay, so let's ask that question. Did Abraham think he was going to lose his son?
Actually, no.
You say no. Why do you say no? I don't know. I just couldn't take the silence. Yeah.
God had promised that his offspring would be, that, and so, well, this is my only chance, so maybe he thought God's testing.
Okay, yes, yeah. So, but here's a question then. It's like, well, if he thinks that he's not going to lose him, doesn't that cheapen the sacrifice a little bit?
I wouldn't say they would to Isaac.
Okay, yeah, so Isaac doesn't have enough faith. Yeah, okay,
He
so,
got right up to the point where he had the knife in his hand, getting
Yeah.
ready to strike him.
yeah.
Was,
And
was Isaac a willing participant in this? It doesn't say his willingness.
How old is Isaac, do you think?
Teenager, young adult,
Yeah, what is he carrying?
probably.
He's carrying the wood for the altar, and this bad boy had to hold him. So I don't think he's Finn's age or anything. So I think he's older, which means that I don't think 100-year-old Abraham is taking down even 16-year-old Isaac.
But he did have to bind him down.
Okay, yeah, so he bound him, all right.
That had to have been a
Willing
fight. There's no way. That he was
Right,
like,
but
oh,
I mean,
okay,
yeah,
good.
once you get if you're not a willing participant, once he binds the first arm, you kind of have an idea of what's about to happen.
He done a cane and just got a rock and
Right, maybe he's unconscious. Okay, yeah. Probably not. but yeah, it's,
Are you going to study the chiasm in this chapter?
I don't know. What do you want to? Yeah. So I have a no. He doesn't think he's going to lose his son. Anyone want to take the opposite? Yes.
I'll say yes, I do think he was going to lose him for the reason you said. It would cheapen the sacrifice if he thinks that, oh, well, he'll just be resurrected right after, or,
Someone get Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11, I forget the verse, but skip down to Abraham's verse in the Hall of Faith for me. And tell me, why was Abraham a man of faith?
By faith, Abraham, when called to go to the place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with them for the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past age and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful who he made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. Keep going.
Yeah, Hey, we're almost there.
All these peoples were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on the earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country that they left, they would have had the opportunity to return.
17.
Yeah, get to 17, would you? Good grief.
okay.
Yeah.
By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. How's that? You want to-
Keep going, one more.
Even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned."
One more.
Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did not receive Isaac back from the
He
dead.
did.
He
Did.
did receive. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So did he think that?
Yeah, all right, let's get
think
it.
that if he cut his throat, that God would just bring you back again?
So, here's something fun that we need to consider. Rabbis have been wrestling with this question that I just asked. Did Abraham know that he might get his son back, or did he go up to the mountain thinking he was going to have to kill his son for God? And clearly here, the author of Hebrews is well acquainted with these arguments made in the Midrash. So something to consider is that the authors of our New Testament were well steeped in Midrash. So something to be said about our studies here that can't just throw out everything in the Midrash because clearly our New Testament authors didn't. Because there are some that are going to say, yes, he absolutely knew that he was going to come back with his son. That's why he tells the men, we are going to come back. There's going to be saying, no, absolutely not. He went up to that mountain fully thinking that Isaac was going to die there. And there's going to be some in the middle who say both. And that's what the author of Hebrews seems to indicate, is this kind of both, where it's like, yes, I'm going to have to sacrifice my son, but God in his power may raise him from the dead, or is going to raise him from the dead. The question then becomes, is what is God trying to teach Abraham in this moment?
To trust him completely.
To trust him completely. I agree. What do you think the conversations were like on the way up to the mountain? I know for me, probably not much talking. The text does not give us any detail about the journey up there, other than that it took 3 days. Now, this will not be the first. This is not the last time that we will see 3 days be significant. Hopefully, one particular story is coming to mind for you all. But 3 days in Hebraic thought usually signifies a transition from one life to another. This is the time it takes to move from a contract mindset, like what do I get, to a covenant mindset, like who am I with? Abraham is unlearning the gods of his youth, gods who demanded death to prove loyalty. The first thing I want us to think about is the 3 days. Obviously, what else happens in 3 days that is of particular significance to us? Yeah, okay. Yes. Obviously, the saving grace of Jonah. No, yeah, I was going to go with the other J name. Yes, so Jesus was hopefully the first one to pop into your mind, but Jonah is honestly the second. We're even told that Jesus with the 3 days is actually the sign of Jonah. And a lot of Hebraic thought thinks that like Jonah died in the fish. That's why it's 3 days that he died and came back to life. He was transitioning into a new life. Same thing with this. Whenever you see 3 days, almost always you're going to see transformation of some sort. Okay, it's always going to be transformed in 3 days. One thing of particular importance here is that we learn from the Bible, but also through other historical texts, that the Near Eastern culture at this time was very much steeped in child sacrifice. In fact, many kings, to prove that they were a king and prove ultimate loyalty to whatever deity that the kingdom worshipped, would often have to sacrifice their firstborn son. So it is not unusual for Abraham to think, if God is going to make me a king, I know what happens. Because everybody else has to do it. You have to sacrifice your son. This is a little bit bigger than that because probably not going to have another one. So Abraham is, it's hard to know what was going through his mind whenever he's walking up the mountain. But it seems from at least the book of Hebrews that this is not necessarily a test of whether Abraham is willing to kill his son for God, but instead a test of character for God. Abraham needs to wrestle with the fact of, who have I hitched my wagon to? Who do I believe this God is? Do I believe this is a God of child sacrifice? Or do I believe this is a God of life? In Genesis 22, verse 2, the Hebrew particle or participle here is na, which doesn't mean like, nah, don't do that, but na as in please. God is actually not doing a cold command. Huh. Is that a wasp or a... Cool. All right. They need Jesus too. All right, so this is actually... this is going to derail the whole thing, huh? Anyone brave enough to get their shoe? So, God is actually not saying like a cold command to do this. In fact, it is a request. It is an invitation into a deeper partnership. The test, in my view, wasn't if Abraham was willing to kill. It was if he believed God was the God of life, contrary to the culture of child sacrifice of his surroundings. One particular question that I have wrestled with in this story is, why is it seen as a good thing that someone would be willing to kill their son? If I said, hey, Terry, God has told me, now I'm telling you, go kill your son, and Terry said, no problem, I would say Terry is a psychopath. Instead, we're like, oh, go Abraham, what faith? No, you're a crazy person. That's why I believe the test wasn't whether Abraham was willing to kill. It was the question, who do I think God is? And am I willing to trust him so much that I'm willing to even lift up the knife?
He had all night to think about it too.
Yeah, he had all night and then 3 more days. Yeah, it's like this is quite the contemplation here.
Before he loved it even.
Right, before he put him in the trunk and hit him. Eastern tradition actually suggests that Isaac was in his 20s or 30s. He was strong enough to carry the wood. This was not a father overpowering a child, but mutual surrender to the mystery of God. Yet we know that Isaac was not fully aware of the plan, because what does Isaac ask?
Where is the sacrifice?
Yeah, hey, where's that animal that we were supposed to use? I'm guessing he got the hint whenever he started getting tied to the altar, but at first, I think he had some questions. The text emphasizes they walked together. This implies a shared purpose and a mutual trust. Isaac is a willing participant in the binding, mirroring the later sacrifice of Jesus. So obviously there is a lot going on here that is going to parallel in the story of the crucifixion. In fact, in Hebraic tradition, Mount Moriah, where Isaac is almost sacrificed, has a new name in the New Testament, and it is called Golgotha. So there, yeah.
It's actually in Jerusalem.
Yeah, that is Hebraic tradition. That this is the same mountain. Yeah.
I was just going to say, my Bible, the commentary in my Bible actually says the mountain is where the temple was built.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's hard to know because this is kind of prehistory things going on here. But yes, a lot of people are going to say this is where the temple was built, but in Jesus' day, the temple is gone. And so a lot of people are going to say this is Golgotha.
I always assume the second temple was built
No, because this. Remember, the second temple is much smaller,
Right.
much smaller and grandeur, and I believe it's in a different location. Yeah.
I always got the assumption that it was built on the remains of the
Yeah, and I guess I don't know that for absolute certain, but that was always. But that's a good question. Yeah, and this is just tradition. This isn't probably like this might not be absolute historical fact, but. At the climax, God stops the knife. This is the moment God divorces himself from the empire gods like Molech. He proves he is the God who provides the sacrifice rather than demanding it from us. The ram in the thicket is the ultimate symbol of Jehovah Jireh, the God who sees our mess and provides a way through. This will not be as tradition suggests, this will not be the last time that God provides a sacrifice on this particular hill. Now, as has been alluded to, I want to ask a question that often we don't ask about this story. Many times we emphasize the mindset of Abraham. I want to ask, what do you think went through Isaac's head?
I think you had to be a willing participant, like you said.
Yeah?
You know, he was probably not a little bitty kid, and when he let him bind him, and I think he was a willing participant,
Yeah, I mean, obviously he trusted his father, and by extension, perhaps God, enough to get on the altar. How would it affect you mentally and emotionally and spiritually if your father was ready to kill you for the sake of God?
I'd listen to whatever he said about God.
Would you?
I would think he was a chaotic psycho.
Yeah, I would say if my father, he's in the room right now, if he said, son, sorry to have to do this to you, but pulled out a gun and put it to my head and said, God told me to, what would I think? And yeah, this happened only once, but what would I think? First of all, I would think you're crazy. Second of all, I'd think, if he truly did hear God, what do I think about that God?
I guess the other side of the story is that, I mean, his whole life, he's the promised son.
Yeah.
That God has promised to make, he's been told this his whole life.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that he's like, if God is who he says he is, something's got to happen. And if he told my father, whom he promised me to, then God's got to be bigger than the situation. Maybe.
Yeah, and perhaps if we just think that Isaac is a giant of faith, maybe.
Right.
I'm going to say,
I'd be a little scared.
humanly speaking, I would say Isaac is emotionally scarred. Why do I think this? Who comes down from the mountain?
Jesse
Where is Isaac?
probably ran off.
All we know is he's not with Abraham. That is one little detail that we often miss about this story, is that Isaac does not come back down. At least the text seems to indicate that Isaac does not come back down. In fact, what is weird is that Abraham seems so sure that we are going to return, and yet even though Isaac's life is spared, we don't. There are a lot of rabbis that think this, and I have been convinced as well, that I don't think Isaac recovered from this. I think this had an incredible emotional impact on Isaac, so much so that he carries it with him for the rest of his life. And we actually see this. Psychologists have actually analyzed the life of Isaac and are going to say that he displays classic signs of PTSD, of someone who has gone through immense trauma and has let it define who they are. Case in point, Well, I guess the first thing we want to note is that Isaac disappears from the text until his mother's death. The mountain created a rift, it would seem, between him and his father. The Akedah had a cost. Spiritual victory does not always mean immediate relational healing. Isaac is a changed man, retreating into meditation and quietude. I don't know if that's a word, but I liked it. We actually see this in Isaac's first conversation with God. He doesn't call him buddy. He doesn't call him friend. He calls him fear. The fear of Isaac. In the Hebrew here, it is not the kind of fear that indicates like awe or reverence. It is, I tinkle myself a little bit when I think about it. I believe Isaac was genuinely scared of God. And I think all of us would be. If the God that our father followed was one that said, and also you almost have to kill your son, or have to be willing to kill your son, would you ever trust your father again? Yeah, I would be like, are you armed before we go? Yeah. Right, yeah, I want to make sure we have the goat this time. Let's not bring any rope. Let's just say that. This is just from the Midrash. I just found this interesting. I know we're a little over time, but I just thought this was kind of fun. Midrash suggests that the angels wept as Isaac lay bound, and their divine tears fell into his eyes, glazing them for his old age. His bad eyes are the physical scar of his trauma. He was blinded by the light of a divine vision mortals were never meant to see, leaving the physical world forever blurry. That's just a midrashic tale, but I do think it has some, even if it's not factually accurate, it does have some spiritual accuracy, that because of what had happened to him, the reality of his world was forever changed. Some classic hallmarks of PTSD that Isaac displays is one, he is very passive. He is one that never actually leaves the land. His life is defined by the actions of others, a common trait in trauma survivors. Isaac is the patriarch that we spend the least amount of time with, and anyone know what his story is defined by? What his father did, what his father did, what his father did, what his father did. Almost beat by beat. His life is defined in episodes by what his father did. This is just kind of interesting psychologically. He clung to Esau's loudness because the quiet complexity of Jacob reminded him too much of the Moriah silence. Even though Esau was loud and shallow, that was more of a comfort to him than the complexity of Jacob. And his retreat into sensation and comfort by the tasty meal and the feeling of Esau whenever it was actually Jacob allowed Rebekah and Jacob to steer the family destiny. It was clear that Isaac, at least in his old age, was a patriarch that was checked out. Kind of like Noah. It's one of those where he was asleep at the wheel. In this case, he was blind at the wheel. Isaac's passivity, born of trauma, created a void that others filled, shaping the future of his family and the covenant. The moral of the story is this: God still works through the almost, the blind, and the traumatized to bring about the blessing of the whole world. But that doesn't mean that great spiritual victories make the mess go away. There is still messiness in humanity and in life. And we will actually see that Isaac, I truly don't believe Isaac ever forgives his father for what happens. We actually see the next time he comes into the story is at the death of his mother. And it almost seems like he then leaves again. Because the next time we see him, he's wandering around whenever Rebekah comes on the scene. Almost seems like Abraham goes to find him a wife, even though Isaac's not there. Crazy, right? Yeah, there's also one last thing. There's also a midrashic tale that Sarah actually dies when Abraham comes down from the mountain and tells her what has happened. And I said in Early Bird, Abraham probably was lucky that she passed, because if she was anything like my mother, we would have been doing the funeral of Abraham about 3 chapters earlier than it does. There is fallout to the binding of Isaac. And I think Isaac actually carries that with him for the rest of his life. Next week, hopefully, we will get to our buddy Isaac and talk a little bit about him and the parallels between him and Abraham. But for now, let's go ahead and close out in a prayer. Father, we love you. And once again, we thank you for this opportunity to come together, to learn more about you, to read more of your word, to learn more about the people that have followed you most closely. God, we learned tonight that even spiritually following you can be messy. God, we ask that we be mindful of